At UFC 311 we saw Islam Makhachev defend his title against short notice Renato Moicano in what was quite an easy title defense, where he showed the levels between the pound for pound best fighter in the world and the number 10 ranked lightweight in the world, which got me thinking, what have been the easiest title defenses in UFC history, where champions have dispatched of their challengers without barely breaking a sweat, with champions from all different divisions, from powerhouse knockout artists to submission specialists to even some outright legendary MMA fighters. Who has had the easiest night in the octagon? Let's find out. This is the Fight Franchise and the top 10 easiest title defenses in UFC history. Number 10, Anderson Silva vs Vitor Belfort. The greatest middleweight in UFC history and arguably in his prime the best MMA fighter of all time. At his best, Anderson Silva made the sport look effortless. The man who holds the longest consecutive win streak in UFC history, and with 10 middleweight title defenses, Anderson Silva has some legendary wins and title defenses, and some of these he has made it look like he was playing a video game on easy mode. Anderson Silva, after some difficult title defenses versus Chael Sonnen and Damian Maia, would come up against Vitor Belfort, who was on a 5-fight win streak, with 4 of those 5 wins being KOs. This was arguably at the time the best striker that Anderson Silva had faced in his title reign, and off the back of 2 tough bouts, it was looking like it could be a tough night in the octagon for the Spider. The two had a tentative bout with a measured approach until Vitor began pushing forward, and Silva would survive Vitor's flurry of offense, which is when Silva, just after 3 minutes into round 1, would pull off a beautiful front kick to send Vitor down, and followed up with shots to secure the legendary KO. A first round KO against one of the most dangerous knockout artists in the division. Silva made light work of Vitor Belfort and showed why in his prime he was levels above the rest of the world. Number 9, Valentina Shevchenko vs Jessica Eye. The greatest women's flyweight of all time has amassed a legendary record in the UFC, with the record-breaking 7 consecutive title defenses, which is the record for her division, which I don't think we will see any women's flyweight break anytime soon. After a failed attempt at becoming women's bantamweight champion, and after the creation of the women's flyweight division, Shevchenko dropped down in weight and would face Joanna Jędrzejczyk for vacant gold, where she would win the belt via decision. From here onwards, Shevchenko dominated her competition up to the end of her title reign, where Talia Santos made her look human and Alexa Grasso would defeat her. But prior to that, Valentina Shevchenko secured dominant wins, which she made look easy, versus Lauren Murphy, Jessica Andrade and Caitlin Chikagian. But we are picking her legendary win versus Jessica Eye, where in the first round, Valentina pieced up Eye on the feet with body kicks and dominated with grappling, with Jessica only reversing the grappling off a failed Kimura at the end of round 1. A breeze for Valentina in the first round. The second round, Valentina came out and smashed Jessica Eye with 2 body kicks and went upstairs with a head kick and put Jessica Eye out cold. This was pure domination by Valentina, and most certainly her easiest title defense, dominating round 1 and knocking out Jessica viciously in round 2, where Eye only landed 3 significant strikes in the fight. A dominant win and her easiest title defense. Number 8, Alex Pereira vs Jiri Prochazka 2. The legendary Alex Pereira has had some epic displays and wins in his career in kickboxing and MMA. He has speedrun MMA and become a double champ in record time, beating some really great competition along the way, and is making a case for himself to be amongst one of the greatest MMA fighters to ever compete in the sport. Alex Pereira, after winning the middleweight title and then losing it in a rematch versus Adesanya, would decide to move up to light heavyweight and would face Jan Blachowicz and get the win, and off the back of this would face Jiri Prochazka for vacant gold, where Jiri previously won the belt from teammate and coach of Alex Pereira, Glover Teixeira. The two squared off in a competitive bout where Pereira would win via second round KO from some brutal elbows, with many and Jiri claiming the stoppage was early. Alex Pereira and Jiri both would get wins at UFC 300, and after Conor McGregor pulled out of UFC 303, both men rematched on 3 weeks notice, where Alex Pereira got a legendary title defense where he looked like he wasn't even trying, piecing up a tentative Jiri who only landed 7 strikes in round 1, while Alex landed 38 and dropped Jiri at the end of the round. They came out for round 2 where Alex landed a brilliant head kick to send Jiri crashing down and followed up with shots to end the fight. To see all the wars Jiri has had and his crazy volume heavy style, to knock him out with him only throwing 7 strikes in a fight and to do it in amazing fashion, this is easily Poatan's easiest title defense and one of the easiest of all time. Number 7, Demetrius Johnson vs Joseph Benavidez 2. The arguable greatest MMA fighter to ever walk the face of the earth, Demetrius Johnson is the greatest UFC champion with 11 consecutive title defenses and has had some mixed title defenses with some difficult back and forths and some highlight reel moments amongst his defenses. But amongst these title defenses, he has had some walk in the parks where he showed against the era of flyweights why he was levels above them. He would have a quick dispatching of Henry Cejudo in their first bout, where he managed to handle the grappling of Cejudo and destroy him to the body and finish him in 2 minutes and 50 seconds of the first round. But we are going with his easiest defense, the quick and brutal KO over Joseph Benavidez in their second fight. After Demetrius Johnson won the inaugural flyweight title in a split decision versus Benavidez in a competitive bout at UFC 152, the two squared off in a rematch over a year later, where after a back and forth 5-round scrap, many was thinking it could be similar. The two traded on the feet in measured exchanges until just over 2 minutes in the first round, Johnson landed a huge right hand which flatlined Benavidez in a quick and easy performance for Demetrius Johnson, where he showed his KO power. To go from a 5-round split decision to a first round KO just shows how much better DJ got as he became champ, and the easy work this title defense was. Number 6, Rafael dos Anjos vs Donald Cerrone 2. With arguably the most stacked resume of names faced in MMA history, Rafael dos Anjos fought a killer's row in his career at lightweight and welterweight and reached the pinnacle of the sport. RDA would join the UFC and have mixed results, and then put together a 5-fight win streak, even beating Donald Cerrone until he was bested by Khabib Nurmagomedov. He would score 2 finishes following this and would dispatch of Nate Diaz over 3 rounds and earn himself a title shot against Anthony Pettis, putting on an excellent display to defeat Pettis and become undisputed champion. His first title defense would be against former foe Donald Cerrone, who was on the best win streak of his career and coming off a head kick win in his last fight. The two squared off where it seemed Donald Cerrone froze at the highest moment, where they traded on the feet, where RDA landed a shot early and was clipping Cerrone and would smash the body of Cerrone and then tee on Cerrone, who was backed up against the fence, just covering up, where Cerrone got space and went for a lazy takedown, which dos Anjos stuffed and would land ground and pound on Cerrone, who was just covering up, and the ref stepped in. Cerrone in many big moments has said himself he has froze and let the moment get to him, and this was no different, and that is why RDA made quick work of Cerrone and secured a finish in just over a minute, which is easily one of the easiest title defenses in UFC history. Number 5, Henry Cejudo vs TJ Dillashaw. Triple C has arguably one of the most underwhelming careers in MMA history, and definitely in the title picture. A career filled with asterisks and what ifs, some due to his own decision making and others due to factors outside of his control. Once Henry Cejudo would win Olympic gold and fail to make the 2012 Olympics, he would give up his wrestling shoes for MMA gloves and make a name for himself in MMA. Cejudo did great, working his way up to a title shot versus Demetrius Johnson, being schooled and beat in 1 round, and would again work his way to a title shot, going to war with DJ in a 5-round bout where Cejudo got a very close decision win, which some argued should have gone DJ's way. With Mighty Mouse being traded to ONE FC and out of the picture for a rematch, Cejudo's first title defense would be 135-pound champ at the time, TJ Dillashaw, who would drain himself down to 125 in a bid to kill the flyweight division. The two squared off where a depleted Dillashaw was bullied by Cejudo, where he would get pushed back and clipped in 20 seconds, where Cejudo landed ground and pound and the ref jumped in, and the fight was done in just over 30 seconds. Yes, many and TJ argued it was an early stoppage, but the fact Cejudo dispatched of Dillashaw on EPO in just over 30 seconds was the quickest and easiest money Cejudo has made in his career, and easily one of the easiest title defenses of all time. Number 4, Islam Makhachev vs Renato Moicano. The pound for pound best fighter in the world at the moment, and the man who inspired this list, Islam Makhachev, at the time of recording this list has the most title defenses in lightweight history with 4, and his defenses have been somewhat a roller coaster of action, with 2 of his defenses being blood and guts wars and some of the toughest tests he has faced in the octagon versus Alex Volkanovski in their first fight, and his title defense against Dustin Poirier, where his defense against Volk the second time and Moicano have been some of the easier times he has had in the octagon. Though his win versus Volk was impressive, head kicking the Australian, this was on short notice for Volk, which is why we are picking his victory against Moicano to make this list. After Arman Tsarukyan would pull out of UFC 311 due to a back issue, Renato Moicano got the call to take the main event slot instead of taking his scheduled bout versus Beneil Dariush, where we would see the 10th best lightweight in the UFC versus the arguable pound for pound #1 fighter in the world. After a few back and forth exchanges on the feet, Makhachev would slip, which upon viewing seemed like a knockdown from Moicano. With the crowd reacting, Islam decided, let me take this seriously, and took down Moicano, and seconds later, after a bit of grappling, Moicano would kick Islam off of him to get back up, but as he would get up, Islam sawed the neck and cinched up the choke, with Moicano tapping and Islam getting a record-setting 4th lightweight title defense and the easiest title defense of his career, showing the levels between him and Moicano. Number 3, Amanda Nunes vs Ronda Rousey. The GOAT of MMA and the greatest female fighter the UFC has ever seen has many amazing victories in the octagon, and some of those wins have been dominant displays where the Lioness was levels above her opponent, to demolition jobs where she has battered her opponent and put away a competition. She has had some amazingly easy title defenses against Megan Anderson, Holly Holm, Irina Aldana and Felicia Spencer, but it is her first title defense after winning bantamweight gold versus Rousey which makes the list. After Nunes won the belt versus Miesha Tate at UFC 200, she would be defending her title against the greatest female fighter we had ever seen at that point, Ronda Rousey, who was making her return after a shocking defeat to Holly Holm. The two women squared off where an intense but reserved Rousey was battered on the feet, where Nunes' pressure, power and ability in the striking was too much for Rousey to handle, where her head was smashed around like a bobblehead where she was taking punch after punch, where the ref stepped in and waved off the fight in just under 50 seconds to get Nunes her first title defense and the easiest of her career. To dispatch and end the career of Rousey, just beating her on the feet with no resistance, and to do it in under a minute, earns this a well-deserved bronze medal. Number 2, Andrei Arlovski versus Paul Buentello. I don't think the UFC heavyweight division will have a quicker title defense in its history than this. As the sport was growing, the heavyweight division was seeing new talent from around the world and different style of heavyweights come through, as some of the era's best at the time were competing in pride. One of the UFC's best was Andrei Arlovski, who would join the UFC and go 1-2 in his first 3, but would win 3 in a row all by KO and would square off and face Tim Sylvia, where he would beat Sylvia for interim gold via submission. Following this, Arlovski would defend his title against Justin Eilers, as champion at the time Frank Mir was sidelined due to a motorcycle accident, where he would be promoted to undisputed champion, where for Arlovski's first defense he would face Paul Buentello, who was on a 6-fight win streak across multiple promotions. Arlovski would create history, scoring at the time the fastest finish in a title fight, where both men had exchanges on the feet, where Arlovski landed a huge right hand which put Buentello's lights out, with no one even realizing, with even Joe Rogan on commentary thinking Arlovski was going for a takedown, but Buentello was just falling to the canvas. A one-punch KO 10 seconds into the fight is easily one of the easiest title defenses in UFC history, and to be honest, even though it is listed as a 15-second finish, it was actually probably 11 seconds. John McCarthy just waved the fight off later, pulling Arlovski off Buentello. This is easily one of the easiest title defenses in UFC history, and if you argue it as number 1, I don't blame you. Just number 1 had undefeated versus undefeated and had a bit more stakes on the line. Before we get to number 1, I want to give some honourable mentions to Volk vs Korean Zombie, Aljo vs a one-armed Dillashaw, Chuck Liddell vs Hanato Subrul, Rich Franklin vs Nate Quarry, and Frank Shamrock vs Kevin Johnson, which I know you will all scream at me, why didn't it make the list? It was a 16-second submission. Just that was MMA in its infancy and the true early days, and the wins on this list are just a bit more impressive. Number 1, Ronda Rousey vs Kat Zingano. The easiest title defense in the UFC's history and arguably MMA history, Ronda Rousey could have had a few of her title defenses made the list, with 5 of her 6 title defenses being first round finishes and 3 of her 6 UFC title defenses being under 40 seconds. We had choices on which to pick as her easiest, but we are going with her fastest versus Kat Zingano. After beating Alexis Davis in a 16-second TKO which could have made the list, Rousey would defend against Zingano, who was a pioneer of women's MMA and viewed as Rousey's toughest test at that point in her career, with Zingano on a 9-fight undefeated streak, where she was coming off a trio of finishes versus Raquel Pennington, Miesha Tate and future GWOAT Amanda Nunes. They squared off at UFC 184, where Zingano rushed Rousey from the opening horn and went for a flying knee, where Rousey just grabbed her and threw her to the ground, and after a few seconds of grappling, Rousey locked up the armbar and Zingano would tap, and the fight was done in 14 seconds. Rousey barely broke a sweat in the octagon. It was easy, simple and flawless, and what every champion dreams when entering the octagon and going through their opponent like a hot knife through butter. This is easily the easiest title defense in MMA history, and the fact it was undefeated, huge amounts of hype and pressure, and Rousey just dispatched of Zingano in 14 seconds, it easily earns it the number 1 spot as the easiest title defense in UFC history. Did you enjoy the video? Let us know down in the comments below. What do you think is the easiest title defense in UFC history? Put that down in the comments below. And do you agree with my top 10, or would you switch it up, or would you add in a different title defense? Put that down in the comments below. And was there anything I missed out? Put that down in the comments below also. Leave a like if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe for more MMA and fight content coming soon, and if you have any top 10s you want me to try out, put that down in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed the video. We'll catch you in the next one.